Welcome to the Church of Mabus radio show. It's Friday night. It's 7:09 p.m. Central. Listen to United Public Radio 107.7 FM New Orleans. We got Wham here representing with us.
Hey.
Chickens are tended.
Yeah, they're tended.
We tended the chickens. Christina Giordano sitting in with us tonight too as well. And our guest is Susy Bastille. Did I say that? Bastille?
Bastille, yep, you got it.
Okay. And did you just say the Bastille Day just happened?
It's on Sunday. It's the 14th.
And what is that exactly? Because I've heard of it, but what is it exactly?
Oh, it's like the French Independence Day. They stormed the Bastille, and that was the revolution they had there.
Okay, cool. And for some reason, before we start, me and Christina recently saw this little 3-episode documentary series on HBO Max called Ren Fair. And it's a real, documentary. It's about this Ren Fest in Texas that's been around forever, and it's kind of ran by this guy named Commander George or something. He's kind of like reminded me of the North Korea dictator or something. But the whole thing is about and that's how he lives. And he's seems like a huge asshole, like big time. And there's these people vying for power to take it over when he passes away, and the whole documentary is about that. But it's cool also because you get to see a lot of Renaissance Festival stuff at the same time, which you don't normally get to see that anywhere except unless you go to it. But that was a weird one. It's 3 episodes, very but Commander George, and he's like kind of like a third world dictator that runs this thing. Is what it reminded me of, but it was amusing. It's called Ren Fair. Well, Susy, I saw that you're working. You're working on like a network of paranormal things, like to bring people together, like an exchange or something?
Yeah, it's a friend of mine, Nath Lockley from Paraverse. We're working on kind of making a network of experts or, different podcasts. So if I am a researcher and I need somebody that knows a lot about UFOs in this one area, I would be able to look up somebody in that area of expertise. Or if I'm a podcast looking for a guest, or if I'm a researcher and I, just stumbled across something amazing and I want to get the word out, or I have a new book to promote, we have this list of podcasts that, you could reach out to, and that would be relevant to your area.
Okay, cool. Is it a site or just like a kind of a networking thing?
So right now, it's just getting off the ground. Look up, there is a Paraverse Facebook group, if anyone's interested. So right now it's a network. It's completely free at the moment. It might not be in the future, but for right now it is. And it's really just kind of, and they're based in the UK, by the way. So I got involved, to try to get some Americans in too, to kind of, have people have exposure to different areas of the world, and things like that. And,
is it Paraverse live show and podcast series?
It is, yes.
Okay, because I just pulled it up.
Yep. Yeah, and they look at the paranormal and different phenomena a little bit differently there sometimes than we do here. So it's kind of cool to get, an outside perspective.
Definitely. Yeah. Definitely, and it's always good for overseas stuff. The biggest thing always with that is time zones, but a lot of people manage to pull that off, but sometimes some of them are up at 3 a.m. unfortunately to do my show, which always kind of sucks.
Yeah, I am now officially a co-host of High Strangeness Factor with Steve Ward and Andy Mercer. Andy is in the UK. We have great fun coordinating schedules.
And I've had Steve on before last year, I believe. And so, what got you into the Bridgewater Triangle situation?
So I live in Connecticut, and the Bridgewater Triangle is up in Massachusetts. So it's about an hour and a half from where I live now. But my father grew up in Fall River, Massachusetts. So you might recognize that because that's where Lizzie Borden was
Hmm.
from. But it's also on the southern tip of the Bridgewater Triangle. So my dad used to use Pukwudgies to kind of keep us in line. They were like the boogeyman. So he'd say things like, don't go too far out into the woods. The Pukwudgies will get you, and things like that. And there was no internet then. So I remember going to the library and looking. There was a very, very small occult paranormal section in my small town library. And I went through everything there, no mentions of Pukwudgie. So I actually thought my dad made it up. But then in 2013, they came out with a Bridgewater Triangle documentary and they talked about Pukwudgies. And I said, oh, wow, he didn't make those up. There's something to it. And from there, I immediately, started Googling things, but everything you find on Google doesn't really, there's not a lot to begin with. And then what is there doesn't add up all the time. It kind of contradicts itself. Or, there's things that are just out of left field, and you're like, well, where did that come from? And everything says that Pukwudgies and everything else in the Bridgewater Triangle is bad and evil and dangerous. But then when you start to read or hear people talk about their encounters, none of them are scary. They're scary because you're seeing something weird, but never are they like threatened or, in a crazy situation, nothing like that. Um, you know, there's a couple of oddballs out there that say they've been possessed or things like that, but you have that just regularly in every area. So none of it added up to me. And so I started to, look into things myself and get out there and go into historical societies, talking to the tribal elders in the area and figuring out what's really going on.
And we've mentioned them before on the show, but we've never done like a whole show kind of centered around it. And I mean, I know a little bit about them, but for some reason, every time I think of them, I think of that wooden doll in that Trilogy of Terror series with Karen Black that comes alive, and I keep seeing its face every time I think of the name. But I don't think that's one of them. But what exactly are they, and what do they look like? Is it like a Native American's little person, like the little things from Willow running around?
Yeah, so generally they're described about 2 to 3 feet tall. Um, a lot of the times you hear witnesses say they have a very chipmunk-like face, and the traditional pictures of them, the drawings or paintings, they have porcupine-like quills on their head and their back.
Hmm.
But I have never personally heard anyone that had an encounter describe them as having those quills. More often, you just hear covered in black fur or hairy, but they always, my favorite part is they have huge pot bellies. And one woman who had an encounter said she couldn't tell if it was wearing clothes because its belly hung so low. It's my favorite description ever.
Definitely interesting. And are they? Does only one sort of tribe have them of natives, or is it kind of something that's in a lot of different tribe lore?
So it's all over the Northeast, New England, Great Lakes region. All Algonquian tribes have some version. Um, the description kind of varies by region, though, and sometimes the names do as well. Pukwudgie is actually an Ojibwa term, but you hear it a lot in Indiana as well. They're well known around Mound State Park there, but a different physical description also, same name, different description. The ones that are there, they're about the same size, but not furry. They kind of just look more like small people, but they have a blonde bowl cut and just these big ears that stick out from the bowl cut, like 90s style hair, and they wear blue clothes.
They have mullets. No, I'm just kidding. But, I'm always trying to figure out some beings I saw once with a friend in the woods, and I've had UFO stuff over the years, seeing them and seeing beings and different things. And the certain beings that I saw were in cloaks and small, and there was a black box in front of them. Have any of them ever come up in cloaks? I don't think they were Pukwudgies that I saw, but the cloak factor, what I saw was like Jawas, but they were skinnier. And then a black cat jumped towards them and they vanished into nowhere. The cat just like saw them and they vanished when it jumped at them. They did. And but have they ever been in cloaks, or what else can you tell us about them?
Yeah, not Pukwudgie specifically. I haven't heard of cloaks, but almost every culture in every region in the entire world has little people lore. You have, the Scandinavian gnomes that have red pointy hats, but you also have duendes in South America and in the Philippines that also wear pointy red hats. So the fashion tends to be regional with little people. But also they don't seem to like cats. There was a duende sighting. It was somewhere in South America. I want to say it was Brazil. And a woman was out for a walk when she heard these like horrible noises. She thought like an animal was being attacked or something. And she followed the noises and she saw a cat that had a duende cornered. It's a little person, that's what they call them there. And she kind of like shooed the cat away. The little creature kind of had some scratches, was banged up a bit, but he just kind of like looked at her and like nodded a thank you and then scurried away.
Wow, that's interesting for sure. And so what are some of the encounters like? Or do they actually come into houses and things happen like poltergeist activity? What are some of the encounters like with them?
So Pukwudgies in this area, a lot of the times they're happening when people are walking their dogs. And as far as I can tell, the dog notices the Pukwudgie first, before the person even realizes that they're there. And the dog acting weird is what makes the person realize it's there, which kind of makes you wonder if you're out walking and you don't have a dog to tell you that there's something weird going on. Are you just walking past creatures all the time? And almost all of the sightings, the Pukwudgie seems to be more scared than the person and kind of freezes. And then there is one that stands out a little bit, which is the Bill Russo sighting. I've interviewed him on my channel. He's also in the 2013 Bridgewater Triangle documentary, and I believe he's been on History Channel and Travel Channel as well. He had an encounter. It was late at night. He was walking his dog. Again, the dog kind of bristled up and was kind of growling at something. And as he got closer, he saw, he described it about 3 feet tall, covered in dark fur, big pot belly. And that one actually talked to him. Not in English, but what it said was, "Iwan Chu, Kia, Kia." And it was kind of beckoning for him to come closer. What he thinks it was saying is, "We want you. Come here, come here."
I think I've seen similar things in like paranormal stuff, or it may have been the same thing like that. Like something was trying to get a guy walking his dog to go into the woods. There's probably a few similar stories too, but I'll have to look him up and check into that more for sure. But that's definitely. And what do they want once if you go? He didn't go. The dog didn't go, right? The dog stopped it or something.
Yeah, the dog was not having it. and he doesn't know what would have happened. And that's, we don't even actually know if that was a Pukwudgie. Some people have speculated it was a Littlefoot. It doesn't. I've never heard of a Pukwudgie talking in any other situation, but again, I don't know the laws of these creatures, so they could very well talk.
So what's with the whisper thing? Is that what is that a Mark Eddy thing, or is that did I do that right? The right title? Are you a Pukwudgie whisperer?
Yeah, so I got into this because I heard so many people out there saying crazy things, saying that they're demons. There's someone saying that they're dwarf Nephilims and things like that. I just saw a video where someone was saying that they're known to stab people repeatedly in the ankles until they bleed to death. Never once has a body been found bled out from the ankles in the area.
Like, that's Dungeons and Dragons, dude. You might want to calm down a little.
So I had been researching for almost 10 years probably, and I just kind of got fed up, and I just, started talking about it, and kind of trying to look at things through the eyes of the Pukwudgie, and kind of peel back the history, because you have folklore that eventually turns into fake lore along the lines when you have lore that's as old as Little People. And one of my friends said it to me. He says, you seem to look at things and understand this weird creature. You're like the Pukwudgie whisperer. And I said, I like that. Let's stick with that.
I know there's a book, Iroquois Supernatural, and I've had them on before. And they talk about like the little people coming up during corn harvest and trading gems with them and stuff. Is that kind of like the same thing, or is it that there's just a lot of different types of little people?
Yeah, in where I grew up in Eastern Connecticut, the Mohegan tribe was there, and they have the Makiawisug is their name for them, but there is a lot of overlap. And their story is that the little people taught them how to grow corn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Ooh, cool. And what do you know about them, Wham, as far as what you know with the natives and stuff? Is that something?
Well, yeah, I mean, I've studied, I put a lot of that stuff in my book because I'm sorry, I'm having allergic reactions to things. It's all right. I can just pull my eyes out and throw them outside. Here in the Hudson Valley, the name for them generally is Wimetacanas, and there are lots of different nations, So like when I talk about them in my Mysterious Beauty book, I talk about the Pukwudgie, which is the Algonquin term for Pukwudgie, and then I talk about the Wimetacanas, and then I talk about the various nations that the Iroquois talk about, because they have several different groups. But yeah, there was one among the Munsee here. There was they became the Delaware when they were relocated, to the west. So that's kind of what people know them now. But they refer to themselves as the Munsee or the Esopus Munsee, and there was definitely a one group of them that was associated with corn, and it was and the way in which the way they symbolized the interaction between themselves and this particular little nation was they had something that was called the doll ceremony, and only certain families participated in it, and they would have like a little doll that symbolized their relationship with or was a sign of their relationship with this particular group. And we don't really know actually what happened in the ceremony because it was never recorded. And we just know that that there were some families that did it. It was one of those secret ceremonies that was never actually observed fully by white people, so it was not relayed. And then there also, the Wemi-Takanis is also connected to another being, Masinkwe, who sometimes was described as being short like them, like you talk about the Littlefoot, sometimes being described as being short like them, but that was more to the east of the Hudson River and west of the Hudson River. They referred to Masinkwe as being really tall and hairy, and I guess he would look sort of like a Sasquatch, sort of. Although that was not a term they used, obviously. But what the Wemi-Takanis would do is when Masinkwe would drive the deer out to be hunted, because there was this fairly elaborate set of ceremonies that they would do, especially in the fall around Masinkwe, the Wemi-Takanis would ride on the backs of the deer, and they would be the ones that would be doing the tree knocks. The tree knocks that are often associated with quote unquote Bigfoot. Mm-hmm. I've met several people who've had encounters with odd small ones or interesting small ones that I put in my book. And the ones that I think of are the story of Bruce Hollenbeck, whose family house is up further north from me, about maybe 45 miles in Kinderhook. And he had a series of interesting experiences with some large hairy thing that happened in the early 80s. It was called the Kinderhook creature. It actually made the national news at one point. But he had a series of experiences that included a little person at one point on his grandmother's property. And there have been several other accounts. There are some people that think that, like what Whitley Strieber experienced, because his experiences were about maybe 30 miles due west of where I live and are considered to be in the greater Hudson Valley area, that some people, I think he has speculated, he has wondered whether they weren't connected in some way to little people, because it turns out that the property that he had at the time, where the cabin where all these things occurred, part of the property in the back part of it, there's a protected area that apparently is a burial place. It's got small kidney mounds on it. So, and he says he was approached by some indigenous individuals who told him that they would really like it when he sold it if he created an easement for it so that would never be disturbed. So he did do that.
Yeah, so I've noticed some connections with burial sites as well. Hockomock Swamp, which is a big part of the Bridgewater Triangle, was a burial ground. They've actually recovered bodies that they've dated to about 9,000 years ago there. And you also have Mounds State Park in Indiana. And I've taken a few sightings in Ohio, and all of those happen near mounds as well.
Yeah, and Ohio is just chock full of that stuff. So
yeah, and someone on the West Coast up in Washington State was telling me that the tribes there have their little people, and they are, they're said to be protectors of burial sites, and also kind of, help people cross over as well.
Right.
And all of these areas that I've just described also have Bigfoot-like sightings as well.
Right. Yeah. There's a place it's actually up the mountain. I don't know if you've ever been to Woodstock here, but right behind Woodstock, the actual town, not the alleged place where the concert took place, which is actually about 60 miles away from the town. But the actual town, there's like a mountain that's right behind it. And if you go through the main part of town and then just literally go up the mountain about 1,500 feet, there are a series of stone formations up there that have survived. And they've only recently actually been put on the protected list. And people, it's called Lewis Hollow, and people around there that live around there have all kinds of stories about little people hanging out in the trees, spirit lights. I mean, you name it. It's all up there, you know.
Yeah, you just kind of hit like one of the things that I would consider like an ingredient to summon a little person is stones. So we have a lot of indigenous stone sites here. I spent the month of June. I took some time off of work, and I've been, visiting a lot of them in the area, talking to local people. You can find out a lot more by, going to one of these areas and seeing an old man fishing and talking to him about it than you can, scouring the internet. A lot of these sites too have they call them Taipei Wonkas here, is the Wampanoag word for it, but a spook light or will-o'-the-wisp type thing.
Right.
Yeah, so there's definitely a lot of commonalities there as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of stuff here. I mean, people are seeing. They call them different things. They call them. I mean, well, the indigenous people here call them spirit ships, but everyday people like that are not indigenous call them fireballs, and they're seen all the time around here, around the lakes. There's all kinds of little lakes, and it's. I mean, it's happened so much that people are just it's sort of normal.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of been normalized. And
that was the first sighting I ever had that I would firmly place as, a paranormal experience. I had kind of things that were, maybe this was something in the past, but I think it was only maybe like a month or a month and a half ago. I was in the woods following GPS coordinates to go to one of these stone sites. And I saw, it was about the size of a beach ball and about the distance, like a school bus length away. And it was red, and then it turned more orangish, and then it just kind of poofed out a little bit. But it was, the best way to describe it, it wasn't like wispy at all. It looked solid, but had like a halo around it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it sounds like the kinds of things I've seen in Pine Bush all the time too. I have not ever seen anything quite like that. I did see one thing like that, a light, a very contained light once, and I was living in a different place than I'm living now, and it was in an area where people do see things quite a bit, and it was very distinct, and it was more of a whitish yellow, and it seemed to be kind of big actually. And at first I thought it was like a helicopter because it seemed to be pretty large, but then it was making no sound at all. It was just completely silent, and it was I was driving home from class and that I'd taught, and it seemed to be sort of following me a little bit. So it was kind of creeping me out because I was on these, I'm sure that you have these too in Connecticut, these like really, really narrow country roads, that are very isolated and dark. And so it was creeping me out a little bit. And I kept watching it. It was kind of over here, to my far right. I kept watching it. Now I went around a curve, And if it had been a regular flying machine, like a helicopter or something following its trajectory, it would have just, followed me and come a little over the hill, and it was gone. It never did that. So I knew that it was something. It was very low. So that's the only time I've ever seen anything quite like that around here. I've seen other stuff around here, though. It's very interesting when you live in a place where stuff like that is normal, and I talk to people all the time, just regular people that have seen things, and they're just like, oh yeah, that's that.
Yeah. So my favorite kind of story like that is from Mansfield, Mass. It was 1971. There was a police officer. His name was Officer Thomas Downey, and it was late at night. And these are small towns. They're not like big cities or anything, but he approached a three-way intersection, and he saw a dark figure about 6 feet tall standing on the side of the road. And he actually thought it was a hitchhiker.
Mm.
And as he pulled up to it and got closer, huge wings erupted from its back, and it flew straight up into the air.
Wow.
Bat Squatch?
A bat squatch.
Yep. And
there's rumors of a bat squatch. If you put bat squatch into Google, like people being serious about bat squatch.
And
basically Bigfoot
he was so taken by it, he actually went back to the police department and reported it. And that didn't go well for him. Does not help your career. But he went back and talked to some people in this neighborhood, and they're like, oh yeah, that bird thing, we see it all the time. Like, it was normal life for that neighborhood in particular to see this, winged humanoid that just takes straight up into the sky on a regular basis.
That's interesting. I know I've had Ken Gerhard about winged humanoids, and I know that can get crazy for sure on a lot of different levels with Mothman and everything like that. But winged humanoids.
Yeah. Speaking of Mothman, in John Keel's book, The Mothman Prophecy, he actually mentions on the banks of the Ohio River during this flap, they see a red orb of light. And on the banks of the river, they see little people on there. And no one, so my feelings on it is little people and Pukwudgies are constantly referenced, and they're kind of just there, but people don't seem to pay attention to them. Like, I know people that have read that book 10 times and don't remember that at all until I point it out, and they go and look and see it, and it's there. And, a lot of people kind of, they've heard the word, but never really paid attention to it. It's people just, I don't know if it's just human nature or if it's the nature of the creatures that they don't want to be noticed so much. So you're not going to. But it is interesting.
We talk about John Keel a lot. We've had Andrew Colvin in Mothman photographer on, and there's some, he's done a lot of work with him and had some DVDs he put out with him in them a long time ago. But I definitely respect his work, and sometimes it seems like people act kind of weird about him in the community. So it's always good when someone mentions Keel, because he deserves a lot more respect than he gets, I think.
Yeah, Keel definitely deserves a whole lot of respect there. I think, unfortunately, he's not with us anymore. And, during his lifetime, he kind of put up with a lot of guff from people. But I think now people are starting, he was ahead of his time. People are coming around to it now.
I mean, he was the one that first proposed having large databases of these things so that you could kind of see, because he noticed that there were these like mega patterns to sightings. He was talking mostly about UFOs, but he was, this can imply things about other kinds of events too. And it was because he subscribed to like a million, however many there were, news clipping services, and so he'd put that crap all over his apartment, and he'd realize, oh my God, this sighting was happening over here in the United States at this time and place, and at almost exactly the same time, something almost exactly the same was happening over here, and the only way you could come up with, now we have computer modeling situations. If you have a database that's big enough, you could start seeing what patterns are there. So he was the first person to really start thinking about that. So like when I wrote my book, it was like, that's what I noticed, is that just even in the Hudson Valley, even on a timeline that only ran from like the early 70s to like maybe the 2010s, you had patterns like that where you'd have a bunch of UFO things happening in one part of the valley, and then at the same time in another part of the valley there would be an explosion of like Bigfoot sightings, but no one would ever talk to each other to see that that's what was going on, and then they'd kind of switch. It's just really weird. I have no idea what that means. You know what I mean? But he was, he understood those kinds of things. So I appreciate him a lot.
Yeah. And it's really important to look at things holistically too. And that was a misstep I took when I first started researching. I had blinders on. I wanted to know about Pukwudgies. I wanted to know about the area I live in. But then you start to, you get exposed to more, and you start to see the commonalities and, make the connections. And I went into this thinking it was just cool local folklore, like cool stories, and then, and I was the opposite end of the spectrum that I am now, is like a complete atheist, did not believe in the paranormal at all. And I was just kind of, intrigued by it. It was interesting, cool stories. But then when you start to see maybe there is something to it, because this isn't just, stories here. There were stories all over the world that are very similar, with other occurrences happening in the same areas. Like, how do you get, gnomes in Scandinavia with the pointy red hat and pointy red hats in the Philippines and South America? That, and you have little people sightings with Bigfoot sightings and UFOs.
Mm-hmm.
When you start to put that stuff together, it starts to make things more real, put things in a better perspective, and you kind of get a better understanding of, maybe what the bigger picture is. Maybe these aren't, little creatures running around. Like a lot of people, when you talk about these things, they think cryptid. Like there is a flesh and blood creature that, and then, they say, why isn't there a body? Why isn't there fur and this and that? Well, maybe because it's not,
Well, maybe because it is and it isn't. I mean, it's right. Interesting that our conversation is kind of segueing into this, because tomorrow I'm a featured presenter on the Anomaly Archives live broadcast. I don't know if you know what Anomaly Archives is, done by Smiles Lewis, but he asked me to very specifically do something on the sort of multi-layered approach to paranormal investigation that like Keel does, or like Paul Eno did, for example, if you know who Paul Eno was. A joke that me and several other investigators for years have done is that, time and time again, we find ourselves, going into the field or the library determined to be the most scientific mind out there, only to find ourselves saging our apartments later on, just in case something followed us home. It's
That's-
like,
that's me.
in other words, it's like, it's because, so basically all I'm doing is because I've been doing this for like 45 years. I've been doing this for like since I was 10 years old, and I'm in my 60s now. And so basically I'm just kind of giving a retrospective. These are the things I've learned. These are the things I would recommend, to people who are just getting into paranormal investigation of various types. And also kind of featuring the investigators that I happen to like, the ones that I think are probably the most useful and the most sane. So one of the things I talk about is what you just described. It's called, in philosophical terms, it's called a crisis of epistemology, an epistemological crisis. In other words, you realize that what you thought you knew about something is you don't know anything. You have some data, but it's like, what do I do with this? Oh my God. And you realize you've just stepped into like something really large. And with most honest paranormal investigators, at some point, they have an experience, and sometimes it's that experience that introduces people to the paranormal to begin with, but they have an experience where it transforms them, where they realize, my friend Gail here, who's the Bigfoot researcher here, the main one here in the Hudson Valley, she had an experience like that in 2013, where she was one of these nuts and bolts people who believed that Bigfoot was nothing just but a lost primate somewhere. Right. And so she was spearheading an investigation at a site just up here in Columbia County, where a guy had a lot of different experiences, and several of his neighbors had too. And so she took a team out there with, they had FLIR, they had all this stuff, all of this technical equipment. And as soon as they got, and there were some signs that something was around, and as soon as they got there, to where these events seemed to happen, or the focus, all of a sudden it was just like chaos broke out. As soon as the Massachusetts researcher who had the FLIR camera was actually able to see stuff, he actually captured and recorded on FLIR film, 5 very clear contacts of 5 different things moving around in the darkness that they were not able to identify. And as soon as he did that and said contact, it was almost as if whatever it was over there understood, and they started throwing rocks at them, started making incredible amount of noise, tearing up the trees. Like large trees, like, 150 to 250-year-old trees. I have a photograph in my book of how they, whatever it was, wrecked the forest. It was amazing. And then everybody started getting sick. Like all the men. Now Gail didn't get sick, but all the men started getting sick. It was like they started getting weak, and they started throwing up. It was like something was physically happening to them. And people that were trying to take photographs like of the investigators, none of their cameras would work, or if they took pictures, it was of these weird orbs and crap. It was just bizarre. And then all of a sudden, the entire place, and Gail still freaks out when she tells me this, the entire place was infused with a blue light, and everything went silent, and that blue light shot up into the sky and disappeared. And it was over. It was like bizarre. And so she went inside. She said she couldn't sleep for nights. And she said, I don't know what this is. You know what I mean? When you see stuff like that and it leaves physical evidence, and you get that data, but you have no frame of reference for what you've seen, then it's like, what do you do? I don't know what you do.
Yeah.
You just gotta go,
I think we would all love to have concrete evidence, but for me, it was experiences
right
that made me believe in things. And it wasn't. I was kind of like tap dancing on the edge of something for a while. I kept having like these crazy synchronicities, like beyond belief. Like there's
Synchronicity is the key, by the way. It is the key. It is
yeah, and, you know, and it all had to do with every synchronicity I was having had to do with both Pukwudgies and my family, my ancestors that were in that area. And just like as an example of like how crazy these things were. Um, so I had started looking into King Philip's War because you
uh, yeah,
can't look into Pukwudgies without understanding
King
that.
Philip's War. Yep.
Yep. So Anawan Rock in particular, in the story of the death of Chief Anawan.
Mm-hmm.
So just real quick, after Metacomet was killed, Anawan took over, and Benjamin Church and a group of people found him where he was hiding at what's now called Anawan Rock.
Mm-hmm.
And Church said, if you come to Plymouth with us, we'll make sure your life is spared. We won't kill you. So Anawan said, yep. And he actually, he gave them this wampum belt that was sacred to the tribe, went with them peacefully. When he got to Plymouth, the officials in Plymouth said, yeah, we know that guy told you we weren't going to kill you, but he had to leave town. So actually, we're going to behead you and quarter you and then leave your head on a pike for a decade outside the town. So when I heard that story, I said, what kind of absolute monster would do that? Because everywhere you look, it just says the officials in Plymouth. Nowhere online could I find who it was. I actually ended up going to Boston Library.
Oh, I'm looking it up.
It was my 9th grade uncle.
Oh, it was so you're related to that dude.
Yep. And then a little bit after I found that information out, I'm still trying to process this. I had a hard time kind of dealing with that information because you hear stories about your ancestors and how great they are, and then you find out they're an absolute genocidal monster. And you have to process that and come to terms with how you look at yourself and your family. And you're not your ancestors, but it's still like a blow to you.
Right. Well, and in if in Northern European terms, you've got what's called a shield. A shield is it's a guilt stain.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so it was understood to be something that would follow through subsequent generations until it was dealt with. So.
Yep. So as I'm like trying to deal with this, I'm in this little shop. It's about 20 minutes from where I live. It's a little metaphysical shop, and there was this man in there that was bringing in jewelry he made that he sells on consignment there. And this other woman in the shop asked him if he was indigenous. And he says, yeah, I'm a Mashpee Wampanoag. And so I heard that, and, I start talking to him, and I'm, explaining all of this that I just found out. And I'm telling him, aside from learning about the history and everything, I don't really know what to do and this and that. And he's like, actually, that guy killed my 9th great grandfather. So my 9th great uncle killed his 9th great grandfather.
Well, there you go.
Wow.
And he was from about 2 hours away. Like, he wasn't local. We just happened to be in this tiny little shop at the same time.
So what did he think about that?
So I think he was a little taken aback by it for a second too. We exchanged. He was skeptical of me at first, for sure, and I don't blame him at all. We had exchanged information. We emailed back and forth for a while. It was actually Christmas Eve this past year. He was having a rough time. I think it was the holidays, and he was battling with his sobriety. So he called me and said, you know, would you be interested in going out into the swamp and seeing some of these sites? So I was in bed about to put a movie on at that point. But I said, yeah, I'll be there. Like, he explained he was, having a rough time and this and that. So I drove out there. It's an hour and a half from me. I spent Christmas Eve in Hockomock Swamp this year. So he showed me like where Anamon Rock was, where King Philip's Cave was, and things like that. And I do recommend doing overnights in these sites. Don't do it in December in New England, though. That was
the weather can get quite bad. And it's very dark, very early.
It is, especially in that area. There's no street lights.
Right. It's very dark, very early.
Yeah.
Definitely sounds interesting for sure.
That's amazing. That's kind of, do you feel any peace about that?
I'm getting there. I do. So what I battle with is when, these things are happening, and another kind of big situation like that happened even more recently. But I always feel like, okay, I'm supposed to do something with this information. Well, what the heck am I supposed to do?
Right.
Like, you feel like there's something that you're supposed to be doing. And I haven't quite put my finger on that. Except I do feel like it's important for me to talk about it. And I know, like, I've had local Indigenous people thank me for doing it too. They appreciate it. It's not fun to talk about. Nobody really wants to do it. But I do think we need to recognize it and, be a little bit more open about it. A lot of us have crappy ancestors, but nobody's talking about it.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And have you ever thought about booking it? Now, Christina has some questions as well, but have you ever thought about doing a book about it or something?
Currently working on that. Yeah. And, incorporating my journey, a little bit about Pukwudgies, but more so what I've learned from people through looking into Pukwudgies is what my book's going to focus on.
Cool. Well, keep us in the loop. You ever seen the horror movie There's Something in the Barn?
No, I have not seen that one.
Write it down if you can or remember it. There's Something in the Barn. I forget which streaming it's on. It's on something, but it's basically about a little, I don't know if they're in Norway or Sweden, one of those places, but there's a little, like, looks like the yard gnomes that you put in your yard, except it's a real one and it turns into a gremlin situation. It's actually a pretty good movie. It is kind of a horror movie, but the creatures make it worth it. They have the beards and the hats, the red hats and everything.
Yeah,
But
the red hats are weird.
There's Something in the Barn. But Christina has a few questions.
Hello. It's kind of silly, but it just made me think of Hollywood and a lot of things. Even Jeffrey and I have seen more and more on TV. It seems like throughout my life anyway, I was born in 82, like so much stuff we think is just entertainment, but I feel somehow they're putting out for us little signs even about these things. Like, while we're talking about it, I'm thinking of the Ewok, and I don't know if that's silly from Star Wars, but kind of the helpers that are living in the trees that would be there to help. Almost again, seeing that's a parallel, like you were saying. It's interesting to see, especially with the Native Americans and their stories, and being able to see maybe a parallel with Sasquatch and just helpers, watchers that are there. Again, maybe counteracting the fear, thankfully, that we're often taught with the unknown. If we don't know what it is, which probably has kept us alive in ways, to not deal with something we don't understand. But again, shifting our mindset away from the fear and being more curious, kind of like the mindset of a child. And going out into discovering what is the truth instead of blocking ourselves from the unknown. So
I think when you are scared, and anxiety especially is a very strong emotion, you're going to attract things. Things are going to be attracted to that fear and anxiety that wouldn't normally be. So it's kind of like, a self-fulfilling prophecy almost sometimes.
Yes.
But and I'm not saying like if you just have a positive attitude, great things just fall out of the sky. That's not what I'm saying. But you do need to take a step back and look at things through a blank lens, because we all kind of have a lens that we look at the world through, whether it's, religion or any other kind of beliefs. Keel said belief is the enemy. To circle back to Keel, I'm turning into Steve Ward now, because I've now brought Keel up twice. So hi, Steve. I see you in the comments there, and Andy as well. My co-hosts are in the comments bothering me.
They asked if we were seeing them, and I said, "I see you." Signed, Eye of Sauron. Do you have another one?
I thought it was pretty interesting, though, too. There's a lot of links to animals being involved, and or this makes me think again of totems and family links to maybe animals, and specifically the cats, and how they're usually, what do they say, guardians of the underworld or whatnot. So I thought it was interesting if they don't sadly get along with them. I don't know if they're trying to make them get out of our world or whatever that means, to be like, you need to go to the other side, you don't make sense. But
yeah, that absolutely could be. And there's so one of the things that I wonder too about like I mentioned, like the people walking their dogs and the dog notices it first. Dogs can hear, see, and smell different frequencies than we can. So are they kind of, starting to manifest, and they're on a frequency that we can't perceive yet, like a dog whistle almost? But I really think that a lot of these people would not have seen. There's your Pukwudgie detector right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's making noises.
Near the mic. I always gotta clarify it's the dog. He's like,
No one's sleeping on our.
He's a trip.
But I thought it was pretty interesting too, where I heard different stories about the lights and mounds, and specifically sounds like often to me a lot of stories I've heard again with possible Sasquatch, even Dogman things that would be around the burial grounds specifically, and watching again, protecting probably even the ancestors or whatnot.
Yeah, there's a lot of belief that they're just kind of like a nature spirit that's connected to the land and kind of guardians of that. And some of these sites, I kind of wonder, and I think it was Andy Mercer who introduced me to this theory of human energy kind of being in one place. If you have people that were, traveling back and forth between these two sites over centuries and centuries, because New England used to be, before Europeans, there was essentially highways. But
Oh yeah, it was just festooned with trails and roads.
Yeah, and the activity kind of follows some of those trails now.
Right.
And you kind of wonder if it's just, the kind of the human energy that kind of collected from people. I mean, there's roads today that used to be those trails, and
Right.
people have just been, leaving their energy there for thousands of years, essentially. But there does seem to just be, certain areas where, it's either easier for these things to come through from wherever they're coming through, or maybe there's just more energy for them to use to manifest. I don't know. But, it makes, sense when you kind of put those things together and look at it that way.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean I have a indigenous friend. He's Micmac. His English name is Evan Pritchard, but one of the things he does, because he has done a lot of research on those kinds of trails and where villages used to be around here. Like he's done this in Western Massachusetts. For Western Massachusetts, he's done it for the entire Hudson Valley. He's starting to do it for New Hampshire. And one of the things that he does is he takes people on walking tours in Manhattan, the island of Manhattan, which of course has been, built over how many times now, but there are still features on Manhattan, like certain streets, certain springs, where it follows the contours of what the land was, where trails were, where villages were, like where Wall Street is now. That actually goes around a palisade that the Manhattan Indians, or the Manhattan people, because Manhattan is an Algonquin term. It's not an English term. It's where they had it was sort of a lookout fort, where the south end of the island is, ironically, where the two towers were. That whole area used to be a big, huge escarpment of rock, and they used it kind of like a stockade, essentially, because they could see way out into the ocean from there. And of course, through settlement, it's sort of been pared down. But what we call Wall Street, that whole area, enclosed basically the palisade around where that was. And so he takes people on walking tours so that people can, he calls it land reclamation. You go and what's interesting is that in some of these places, there are some places where, maybe it was used as farmland at one time, and now it's a park, like it's a little park, and so that it was never really built on. And they do have interesting, people don't think of like a city like Manhattan as being haunted, but there are some odd places apparently in Manhattan that if you live in the city and you know about them, and they're connected to some of these old things, and so he's actually written a book where he talks about all these different places, and you can go on a walking tour with him, or you can just follow one of these books and kind of take yourself around. It's very interesting how that stuff stays in the land.
Yeah, I just went to a site called Gunji Womp. It's in Groton, Connecticut, right near the sub base.
Oh yeah,
And it's actually it's an ancient stone site, but you have to walk through Navy housing to get there. And it's maybe a mile from the main entrance of the sub base. And no one really knows people know it's there, but not exactly where it is.
right.
And, that's a pretty cool site as well. It was, there's ceremonial stone chambers with astronomical alignments, and there's snake and turtle effigies.
Yeah, that's wild.
And there's this one cliff edge where to this day people still have very powerful emotions at this one. They call it the Cliff of Tears. A lot of people just get real emotional in that one spot to this day. So there was actually a colonial farm built on top of the existing structures, which kind of messed up the landscape. And then there was this these people in the 60s that called themselves the Gunji Womp Society that went in and tried to push the narrative it was a Celtic site, because we like to do that in New England.
They always do that. Oh, the Celts had to do it.
Yeah, because that's our ancestors, and we want to think they did great things. And
well, they did, but just not here.
Not here, right? Well, mine didn't do great things here, but other people.
I'm talking about maybe in the British Isles or in Europe, they maybe did great things, but not here. Yeah.
Yep, for sure.
Got any other ones, Christina? You want to ask?
You do, but you can ask more.
Well, you can go ahead. It's fine.
Pretty much it was just making me think of just similarities and stories that I've heard around the world, which pretty much Professor Lamb was saying, which is awesome. Even making like basically just opening the communication for all of us to hopefully around the world see similarities and stop fighting over stupid things like politics and religion and dividing. I at least utilize the internet and all of the things we have now as tools to hopefully bring awareness. Because I know even Jeffrey's had people fighting over like there's no way that a Sasquatch could be an alien, or have any kind of similarity. And it's like, what the heck? They're about to like murder each other over it. So it's awesome,
Yeah.
like a library system or a place to come together and actually be able to talk about it and not be laughed at, which is a nice start. Even being from the medical world and or being raised Pentecostal Christian, like I was always taught again, yes, everything bad is like a demon and or it's scary. Let's just leave it there. And I pretty much even as a child would be like, well, even an angel would be scary then. It's like, how do you know the difference between the two? Or so asking questions even in that like that early age, usually it was you're bad, like always my whole life going, oh my god, I'm a witch and I'm going to get murdered from my own family because I'm asking questions that are outside the norm. So it's just awesome to have somewhere to go to actually all talk about things and hopefully put our differences aside and yes, actually take accountability for our choices and what we've done and maybe our ancestors, because even if we don't want to believe it, we do kind of have, there is something to it, that could be kind of a heaviness or whatever you want to call it, a curse or sin. That yes, it's nice to hear, okay, I did do wrong and so I'm sorry, and my ancestors did wrong, I'm sorry. I've been the one that's a part of Native American ceremonies and actually feeling nervous that I'm like, I'm a believer and I better not get murdered here because sadly other people have hurt them. And I've been able to thankfully say, I'm sorry that you were treated that way and you didn't deserve to be treated that way. And actually be able to say, I was treated bad too. Like where I was damaged the most was in church. So I'm sorry. And I actually have been going through the same things in ways. So no joke, I've been adopted into their ceremonies and have a family I never thought I would have through going through all the hell of weirdness, even religion, and totally exactly seeking the truth and saying no more being told what is reality, what is it. And what's scary is the more you look for the truth, the more it blows your mind usually. And then you're like, what do I do with this Pandora's box? So it's nice to have somewhere to go. Because even finding a counselor, you could end up on meds or locked up in an asylum, sadly, for telling them what you've seen or feel even all your life. So
Yeah, I've had people come to me because I have a website, a blog where there is a contact form, so you can, if anonymously or not, if you have a sighting or anything else. And I had one person contact me, and they didn't want to give me their name. They obviously had just made like a burner email to reach out, and they just said like, I feel absolutely crazy, but I saw something that I thought was a leprechaun in the woods once. I think, ghosts and Bigfoot is becoming a little bit more mainstream, but you can't go to work on Monday and say you saw a troll in the woods.
right.
There's very few places where you can talk about stuff like that openly. And, the community in general, like we need to do better with sharing information and research. It's fine if you're making money from what you do, but your goal should be to figure things out, you know, and we can't do that without each other. There's no one person that can figure things out. And we might not ever be able to figure everything out, but we can get a little bit further when we have conversations like this and we're talking. Or
well, and as you've figured out, this is actually also a personal process.
oh yeah.
It's not just finding out the objective truth about stuff. This is about our relationship with each other and our relationship with the land and our relationship with the world. And so it's kind of important that we connect with each other about it, because we're talking about things that bind us together, you know. And sorry to interrupt you, but I got excited.
No, that's absolutely great. I totally agree.
And yes, someone threatened to come to my house and beat me up because I thought Bigfoot was paranormal once a long time ago.
So
And
I've had some pretty good ones. I had someone call me a UFO nut and tell people not to listen to me because I said that the Bridgewater Triangle isn't weird because of a Native American curse. And they happened to write a book based on that premise, so I think that's why.
And I bet I know who it is.
We could talk after.
I bet I know exactly who that was.
And I, you know, it was weird before that happened. And you know, if you're gonna curse someone, you're not gonna curse it. So this little area has weird lights and strange creatures. I'm gonna make a better curse than that. Just, you know, think about it.
Well, yeah. Well, if it's the person I think it is, they are interpreting paranormal things in a particular way. So
Yeah, through the lens of their beliefs, and
yeah.
that we try not to do. And you know, it can be hard, but and you know, we kind of touched on this before. You get to a point where you're seeing things where you might have to change your beliefs. And I think some people can do that and some people can't.
Yeah. So that's true. That's why it's really vital to, you know, and it's, you know, I kind of go both ways with it. On one level, it's like it's important. That's why it's important to know about a lot of different people and a lot of different researchers to see what all the angles they're coming at something from. But it's also important to recognize when someone has their limits. You know what I mean? Because there are a couple of researchers, like in my talk tomorrow that I'm going to talk about, who were just excellent colleagues. I just adored them. They're both passed. They were just excellent people, but each one of them had certain limits, you know, and they couldn't go beyond those limits, and so they also had a limited ability to recognize it. You know what I mean? They sort of knew it, but and it, you know, and that's just people stuff. You know, that's sort of just where the way people are. You know, all of us are about that with something. You know what I mean? So, you know, it's difficult, and it's part of the reason people want, obviously, to pigeonhole other folks, is that, you know, they want their own beliefs confirmed. And if they've written, this happens in academia all the time, if they've written something and they're making money on it and their career depends on maintaining that perspective, then if you have a different one, that's a threat.
Right.
So, you know, it's then it becomes political, and oh well, now we're back to being human again.
Yeah, and who wants to do that? Like I like to talk about the paranormal so I don't have to think about politics.
Yeah, I know. I'm the same way. It's like no.
Yeah, but it's definitely been crazy. It's so crazy. I don't even know how to put words to it. The words I have so far is the Mummy versus the Antichrist, and that's our political election in November. But other than that,
Florida man.
And I lean towards the Mummy, but other than that, let's not do that. But I was surprised that George Clooney's saying he should step down now. We should get George Clooney's character from Dusk Till Dawn to run for president, and then that'll scare everyone, and then we can do that. But
I also think it's interesting that we regard George Clooney, who, by the way, I don't mind as an actor at all, that we regard George Clooney as an expert on anything. I mean, just because a famous person does not mean you know what the hell you're talking about.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. And I've noticed on some of these paranormal shows, like we've been watching Paranormal Caught on Camera just for fun and Ghost Brothers and stuff. Like we don't normally watch a lot of that, and I keep up with the Skinwalker Ranch shows. Those are crazy in itself because there's so many government spooks on it, which make it more creepy. But I've noticed this weird, like, and some of this surveillance camera stuff, and I don't know if all this stuff's real. Obviously, probably not. But there keeps like this bald entity keeps showing up, and there was these kids with a hunting rifle scope hooked to a phone, and they were hunting, and this big like weird bald long arm thing walks through the woods, and it's weird the video because there's some dogs playing up in a field above it, and then there's coyotes following the crazy weird thing. And but I've noticed that same type of entity in some other footage on the same show, and there's one that's this one was like kind of striding and didn't even, I don't think it knew they were even filming it. And the other one was like this weird one that seemed almost handicapped that was on a security camera, and they kept saying it was the Wendigo or Skinwalker or something. But there was some eerie footage of that was definitely, it was creepy. But with these shows, I mean, that show seems like they do a good job at vetting stuff, but you still can't believe everything on there, of course, or you'd be an idiot. But those particular ones that I keep seeing of this weird bald thing, like I keep creepily seeing that one. It's like,
Are you sure? Are you sure it's not you?
I know. I think it's me in the future. That's what I'm worried about. It was weird. The plumber here today, I was talking to him. He started talking about Wendigos. Just a plumber I barely know. And he says when you sin a lot, that's what you'll turn into. Wendigo from sinning.
Well, there you go, Jeffrey. Be careful.
And,
but we wouldn't have any politicians left.
Yeah, I know, true. But have you seen any of those kind of videos or anything come up where these weird bald-looking Nosferatu things, and they say they're Wendigos, or whether there's anything like that ever popped up in your research?
So there are a lot of people that want to call everything a skinwalker, and like I think you don't know what that means at a point. Actually, there was an episode of Beyond Skinwalker Ranch where they went to the Bridgewater Triangle. And they talked about Pukwudgies, and guess what they compared them to?
Skinwalkers. That's like, no, they're not. They're completely different.
Yeah.
Stupid. I think I watched those shows, and I haven't watched the newest stuff, but the creepiest, I believe there's phenomenon there, and I'm someone that's had similar phenomenon that the Chris Bledsoe, I've had light stuff and asked it to move and done that crap. I couldn't do it now, probably. I think they've given up on me. But other than that, the creepiest thing, like I say about those shows, is there's so many government spooks there. It's alarming. Like there's Colonel John Alexander, there's former CIA analysts, there's Bigelow Security, I mean, you can just go on and on. They're up to something with that show. I don't know what, but it makes me not trust it more. But I do think there's stuff going on at ranches. I know Stacy Brown, who lives in this area, there's some ranches here in Florida. So, I mean, there's stuff going on at ranches for some reason. But the biggest creepy thing about those shows is it's just infiltrated by government spooks. Like that's more creepier than the phenomenon.
Yeah, and those videos and those other shows too. I tend to believe people when they say they saw something weird. I don't always agree with how they interpret what they saw. Because you have, I don't think we're the best at judging our own experiences. First of all, you need someone else to look at it and break it down for you, because, there's a lot of, feelings and emotions involved. You kind of get lost in your fear sometimes too. I think it's helpful for someone else to interpret it, but not someone that's on TV necessarily that's going to say it's a Wendigo or a Skinwalker. Because those are the two words that they know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Skinwalker seems kind of stupid.
Well, and skinwalkers are a very specific, a very cultural specific thing, and you can't just call everything that. I mean, I think where they try to draw the similarity is that Wendigos, which is how you actually pronounce it, Wendigos and skinwalkers are both supposedly connected to the idea that they were once human beings, and that because of certain types of activities, they got caught in a very unfortunate way of being. Hold on for a second. Hey, Alan, there should be a package out there.
And Christina had a question.
Sorry about that. I just got pulled away. And but the difference is really if you know the lore, about Wendigos and Skinwalkers. Skinwalkers are doing this kind of thing intentionally. It's very intentional, at least in the Dene perspective. It's very intentional. Whereas Wendigo is also understood to be a spirit or tendency that is independent of human beings, that possesses and infects human beings. Animals can be infected by it. Places can be infected by it. So it's a very, very different idea of, it's not just somebody going cold cocked off and doing something. In fact, if we're going to put it in a modern perspective, the way some indigenous like Cree people have explained it to me is that it would be their way of explaining certain types of mental illness, particularly mental illness that is associated with long winter nights, which can create, for some people can create a kind of winter, a winter sickness, they called it. But they are completely different things, and it just drives me crazy what capitalism does to people. It just makes me nuts. It's like the Skinwalker is not a brand.
You just make a new word, like
yeah, exactly. It's not a brand.
Yeah, like you could have something that's similar, but it's not that. You don't have to, steal a word that already exists and force it to fit into that box. Sometimes you could have new things. Make a new word for it, please.
I mean, it's just really well. And the thing that's interesting is that, we just kind of throw that word around, and, for the Dene or the Ute, or, the different nations for whom these kinds of things are important, they don't talk about it. It's like, you're not supposed to talk about it. If you talk about it, you invoke it. And it's like, it's like white people. I just want white people. It's like my Micmac friends and my Muncie friends, like, and why would you want to go out and hunt Bigfoot? Like, really? Like, really? So why would you want to do that? Like, why would you want to hunt Pukwudgies? You know what I mean?
People are crazy, for
And of
sure.
course, the way I look at it is, none of your photos are going to turn out good anyway, so why are you even going to bother? But I don't know. That's just me. I mean, when I moved here to the Hudson Valley, and first made my connections with indigenous people who live here, they told me several things, and one of them was, do not walk alone in the woods. Even during the day, do not walk alone in the woods. And they weren't just talking about bears, which you can run into here, or people, which I'm even more afraid of than bears. They were talking about other stuff. So it's like, I take that seriously.
And Christina had something to add about something. Here you go.
Sorry, I keep chiming in hilariously, trying to write stuff down in between. Basically, he had mentioned watching that show where specifically he thought maybe was a skinwalker, but it was in Arizona that they were talking about, and I think that the possible Wendigo was up in Oregon. Not that it
Wendigo is in Wendigo is the word is in Canada.
Okay.
It's
Well, they were saying in the show for some reason they were saying it was in Oregon, so I don't know if that matters. But I know when I was in Arizona last year, I was raised there, so I've been around the natives that were, again, that's the Southwest usually with the Skinwalker. He's
Mhm.
watching the Skinwalker Ranch, which weirdly, when I met him, exactly, he was more, I would say, fearful of even saying the word. He would say SW instead of saying the word because he didn't want to conjure in stuff. And then throughout 5 years, it's like now he's okay with the word and he's just saying it like nothing. And yeah, I'm like, stop, shh, not trying to be afraid of it. But again, I have gifts. So I've tried to tell him it's really important what we do play with, whether it's a Ouija board or whatever. We need to be careful, like a gun, not to just play with it and get ourselves hurt. Because no joke, while I'm in Arizona, he's watching the show. I didn't even know he was watching it. And I'm even in the Bradshaw Mountains and all of the area where it's like he's watching another one specifically at a Bradshaw ranch. And he's telling me about it. I go, that's in Sedona, and that's not far from where I'm at. And I was seeing things that were very scary, like dog-like things. And I've never seen stuff like that until I was with him. And in the last couple of years, more and more, where it's like, again, not trying to be afraid of it, but saying exactly it's why is the government talking about all of these things now and acting like it's normalized and okay? And so, yeah, I'm more leery to be like, why are they doing this? And we need to be more careful with what we're doing, our intention. And yes, not doing it for the wrong reasons, which I feel we have to be careful not to be going in for money situations, which to me a lot of times is government. So I don't trust the government usually. So I just thought it was interesting specifically that we watched that video after I came back to Florida from Arizona, and they were showing somebody hunting in Arizona, and that's what he had saw was maybe it was a skinwalker, and I'm like, maybe. But either way, it's like, let's be somehow more respectful. I think that's what it is, maybe.
Yep.
Throughout time, maybe even the natives were like, we need to be careful. It's like, yeah, why would you want to go out looking? It's like looking for an actual serial killer by yourself. Like, where's he at, or he or she? Yeah, we need to be more intelligent with what we're doing, and definitely quit trying to label things. That's what I realized too, especially in Western medicine. It's like kind of trying to find fault in it too quickly. Like, oh, you're not like everyone else in the box. What's wrong with you? And you must have this or that or whatever, and which means we need to give you something to fix it. So it's almost like maybe that's the same mindset we're even trying to put into the paranormal world, which is just going to blow all of us away in ways like we don't want to be, I don't think.
Yeah, a little bit of respect goes a long way. And I think a lot of investigators that are in the field need to remember that too. I mean, you have, the ghost hunter shows that go in and scream at ghosts, and
crazy. Oh!
And then you have, I'll talk about Pukwudgie specifically. Like, you have these guys go into these sites, and they're just trying to get evidence. They're trying to get something on film. You go to these sites, and these are most likely some kind of nature spirit, something connected with the land. And there's all this lore about them being upset with humans at some point. If you go to these sites that you hear about in the Bridgewater Triangle, and I have videos on my YouTube channel for anyone that wants to see it, it is covered with graffiti. There is trash all over the ground. And this is the Wampanoag Reservoir one of these sites is on. And people will go. And the last time I was at a Sonnet Ledge, someone had just thrown a whole bag of trash on the gate. If you want to learn and safely go and pay your respects, pick up that trash that's there. And definitely don't leave any more. The way to piss off a nature spirit isn't a wampum belt curse. It's to put graffiti all over their homes and leave garbage there. Like, pick up your damn trash. This is why, if they are mad at people like people say they are, that would be why.
Yep. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Crazy.
Disrespect.
I was just gonna say, I'm more concerned all these things are gonna rise up at Ragnarok and eat us.
pick
all
up
of
some trash and maybe they'll hear you.
Yeah, we do. We try to do that a lot of times when we walk down the road and stuff like that. And we had a weird situation where there was a cat we saw that got hit by a car, and we moved it, and something said in my head, "Thank you." And then later, a few days later, my mom saw it in her room, like in ghost form, like she sees weird stuff in morning times. So that was a weird one with the cat situation. But yeah, I know Skinwalker is usually like a witch or something, like kind of like a witch that can shapeshift. And then a lot of people seem to be throwing the dog man onto it for some reason. I'm not sure why that is. But I know on Skinwalker Ranch they have like a lot of natives coming out telling their encounters now, which could just be the Washushu tricking them to do it. But I know the native like radio show and stuff like that, and so there's a lot more of them talking about it. It seems like the natives and everything. But yeah, that was a weird one with Chris Bledsoe and the neurology X-Men hat and the CIA's former spooks, and he's summoning phenomenon near Colonel John Alexander. Then you look up UFO of God, the book on Amazon in the Christian section with 5 stars, and everybody's under it going, "Oh, now we're having this happen." And Colonel John Alexander's like, "You can be one of us," or something weird, some weird blurb that's weird, very bizarre. I kind of look at it like it's a John Carpenter movie more than anything. But definitely, I don't know if you've seen that book, UFO of God. Look it up on Amazon. It's pretty. I bought it, but I didn't finish it. But it's weird. It's weird. It's definitely, the comments and reviews are very weird. It's basically people saying they're doing the same thing now. So definitely strange. But so what's up? We saw your co-host earlier. What was their names? I know I've had Steve Ward on. What was the other guy?
Steve Ward and Andy Mercer.
Okay. And you got any Vlad the Impaler specialist on your exchange yet? I'm always looking for those around Halloween. They're hard to find, but there's been a few.
I mean, my ancestors used to put heads on pikes, apparently. But that's about as far as my expertise goes. So
We had a guy, Victor Foya, on that writes kind of historical Vlad the Impaler books, and he's from like Romania and has a real eye patch, and we had him on for Halloween telling us
A real eye patch.
wasn't just for show. It was really like an Odin situation. But
You're so funny.
but definitely so what's up? What is there any other cryptids that you fancy that stand out that you may conquer in the future?
So I've kind of been going where the universe takes me, which is right now, I think, kind of, unfolding. I mentioned that one story. I'm still not sure my personal beliefs on human spirits, but I might have just had my first experience with that. Still unpacking that one. And again, it was related to my ancestors and this site in a swamp with a bunch of big old stones, because that seems to be where things happen to me.
Big old things with stones.
Yeah. Yep. So in this, someone I was Facebook friends with, and I don't even remember how we became friends. They had commented on one of my posts that wasn't even related. You should go to this site. I'd like your opinion on what the energy is like there. And it was the Great Swamp Massacre Monument, which is in West Kingston, Rhode Island, near Narragansett.
Right.
And I'm not normally this agreeable, but I immediately said, yep. And I went that weekend. So you have to walk about half a mile through a swamp to get to the monument. And the entire place was swarming with deer flies.
Mm-hmm.
And I was getting bit all over. I had huge welts all over my face and my arms and my neck from all these deer flies. I get to the monument. It is an obelisk. And then there are 4 cornerstones. There's one that says Connecticut, one that says Rhode Island, one that says Massachusetts, and one that says Plymouth. It was for each of the colonies that were involved in the massacre. And when I this whole time I'm getting horribly bit by these deer flies until I went next to the Rhode Island stone. And that was like the safe place. There was no deer flies bothering me, only in that one place. So while I'm there, the first thing that happens is my digital camera battery drains. I had a spare one, replaced it, took some pictures, took a whole bunch of videos, also took pictures and videos on my phone. And I leave, I had some other things I wanted to see in that area, went out to lunch, went near the shore, came home. Normally, I get really excited about making a video about the history of a site. I was totally wiped out when I got home. I kind of looked through my pictures and videos. I said, I'll do this tomorrow. All of my videos were fine at that point. The next day, when I went to make the video I had intended to make, all of my videos were gone. They were just black screens on both my digital camera and my cell phone.
That's amazing.
So I ended up looking into the history of the site. Again, I found my ancestors involved. So I made the video and I did talk about that, and I sent it to the person who had told me I should go there. And I said, I think there's a reason that you told me I should go there. And he said, yeah, my higher power wanted me to tell you that. Just like matter of fact. Just like that. And I sent him the link to the video. He watched it and he says, my dad's ashes are at the Rhode Island stone. And that's why the deer flies weren't bothering you there.
Wow, that's interesting for sure.
Yeah. So, and again, it was my ancestors murdered your ancestors random meetup.
Right. Well, I think you're repairing blood guilt is what I think you're doing.
I feel like I'm on the right path with whatever I'm supposed to be doing, at least. I'm never too sure if I'm doing the right thing or not, but I feel like I'm at least going in the right direction,
Yeah. It's you have to remember. Have you seen Twin Peaks?
Yes.
Okay, so when Agent Cooper says, "Gentlemen, when two separate events occur simultaneously pertaining to the same object of inquiry, we must always pay strict attention." So
that is how I've been navigating this.
Mm-hmm.
So all the goblins back there from that one case, that was a case where they were on that house, the roof of the house and stuff like that and doing crazy stuff. The goblins.
The Kentucky goblins behind me. Yes. Yep.
Checking them out. There's a lot of goblins going on back there.
Oh, that's the Hopkinsville? That's the Hopkinsville dude?
Yep. I've got those paintings there. I've got this guy here.
I wasn't even paying attention to what was behind your head.
I do have a puppet. My co-star is also a Hopkinsville goblin.
Oh, look at you.
I just like small little goblin-like creatures. I have a soft spot for them because I relate to them.
Like gremlins, yeah. What was the final verdict of that case? That just didn't the town go nuts, kind of like a small town monsters town situation where everybody goes kind of cuckoo, and what was the final verdict of all that?
So I think there is something to that one personally. If you look into that family, the town, what was going on at that time, there's no way all of those people would have gotten their story straight, but they all had their story straight. So I do think there's something to that one. We can all speculate on what they were.
Was there a UFO or was it?
There was a craft in that one. Okay. Yep.
Yeah, there was a craft.
Yeah.
That's always been one of my favorite favorite episodes. I mean, favorite stories. You know, that and the Flatwoods Monster.
Yeah.
Those two, for some reason, they just really, you know, I don't know what happened, but something did. You know.
Yeah, and I really miss like the old one and done entities and not all the grays. The grays are so boring. I'm so sick of them. I like the old weird ones. And I don't know if it's like a collective unconscious thing where you're seeing what you're expecting to see, or, you know, it's appearing in the way that it wants to be perceived. I don't know. But I just wish we'd get some weirder entities or aliens or ultra terrestrials or whatever, UFO pilots, we'll call them.
Right. Something. Now, do you listen to the podcast Just a Tinfoil Hat?
Is that Brandon? Is
No,
that
it's
Brandon
no,
or Brandon? No,
no,
different
no,
one.
no. It's I can't remember her. She's got a really interesting name, but she
Starts with a Z. Christina said Z.
yeah, it starts with a Z, but she specializes in doing the doing research and finding these weird stories. It's just another tinfoil hat. That's what it's called. Just another tinfoil hat. And what is her name here? Hold on. Let me look real quickly. See what her name is. Be quiet. Oh, what is her name? I can't remember what her name is. Yeah, it's like Zelda or something. It's like Zelda. Zelia. Okay, right. But no, it's on YouTube, and it's called Just Another Tinfoil Hat. It's their channel on YouTube, and like one of the last ones she did was the slow-mo Silver Saucerians retro UFO counter 1973 year of the humanoids. Connected to some sightings in Indiana. So she looks up the weird crap. And she just does a really good job of doing the research and just telling the story. That's all she does. It's very simple, just doesn't try to explain it. Just here's a weird story. Here's these weird toad people that this guy saw, I love sightings of toad people and like weird multicolored amphibians. I just think that those are so great. But check her out.
Yeah, and I love when people just tell the story and don't kind of like pontificate or theorize. Just here's what it is. Make of it what you will.
Yeah, exactly. That's all she does. She just here's this story, and she finds them in all these weird places. There's another guy too. I can't remember his name either, but his YouTube channel is called Beyond Creepy, and he's been doing this for a while, and he finds stories. They're not just humanoid, they're not just contact stories like this, but he finds really weird stories in interesting places. I'm not sure where he finds stories in like non-Western, even in non-English places. He gets somebody to translate them and then will tell stories. So he's got a whole set of stories from Eastern Europe, and he's got stories from like the Middle East, and stories from South America that you would never hear anywhere else. Just odd stuff. But and some of his story, and that's all he does. He does talk a little bit about, he does a little bit of analysis at the end of each story, but not a lot. It's just kind of like him thinking out loud about it. He mostly just tells the story, and he gets great stuff. I love to listen to him. He just, in both cases, these are like on YouTube, and they're like usually no more than 15-20 minutes long, max. Very concise.
Here's a quote Christina found. The earliest known reference to pygmies is in a letter written around 2276 BC by Pharaoh Pepi II to the leader of an Egyptian trade expedition up the Nile. The letter described pygmies as dancing dwarfs of the god from the land of spirits. So that's pretty interesting. It's interesting how all these things are in every culture, especially like Norse and stuff, and of course all the fairy lore and how like there's similar denizens in every culture or belief system.
I know you were being silly talking about politics where you mentioned the mummy, but it made me think of one of the remakes of the mummy, and they had in it something with pygmies, which made me think of people who would see them as scary. And something in that movie, I don't even know if it was real, but they were kind of like Hannibal, like, and they were zombies in that movie. Where I don't know, I just for fun looked up quickly on my phone pygmy, and what I found was a bunch of information, and that's what I was mostly showing him was culturally going back to all different Roman, Egypt, and obviously in the US, but just mostly showing that there's something that's been discussed throughout history that was small statured things that weren't always scary. From what that sounded like, happy that would be dancing around. And so I don't know, it made me think that that could be something linked or similar.
And, to your point, we had it happen in Europe. At one point, you had the Celtic culture that was more pagan. They looked at them just as nature. I'm talking about, it would be the Fae in relation to that part of the world. But they looked at them as nature spirits that were just, they needed to be respected. But, you could live in harmony with them. And then when you had, the Romans come in and conquer them, and you have, different religions moving in, that's when, they become scary and demons. You have the same thing here. This is, one of the first contact points in America. And when the Puritans or Pilgrims came over, they heard about these little hairy men in the woods, and they said, those sound like demons. Those are evil, And
Well, we will. I got to close out. We're supposed to close out at 55. So it's been a great show. I've been really tired, so all you ladies helped carry the show. It was great. I love the subject matter. Loved it. Someone asked if they heard growling on the feet. That's probably the dog, the Boston Terrier next to me. That's snoring. He makes weird noises, Sun Dragon. But Susie, it's been a great show. Thanks to Wham and Christina. What are your links so we can give them out? Any links?
Yeah, my blog, if you have a sighting that you don't want to have your name attached to and report it anonymously, it's pukwudgies.blogspot.com is my blog. And there's some articles I've written and some information there, but it's a great, way to contact me if you have a sighting or need information. I am the Pukwudgie Whisperer on YouTube. And I was actually just announced this week. I'm now officially co-host of the High Strangeness Factor with Steve Ward and Andy Mercer. And Steve, Andy, and I also have a side project called the Paranormal Book Club, where we all read books and then discuss them afterwards. It gets a little bit intense sometimes. Our first one was The Mothman Prophecies by John Keel. And if anyone would like to stay up on my adventures in swamps, the best way to do that is follow me on Facebook, Susy Bastille there. And I am always talking about little people. I'm sharing the Susie Cam footage from my swamp adventures on a regular basis when I'm out in the fields, and, lots of pictures. So if you're interested in the Bridgewater Triangle and you want to see what these sites actually look like, got plenty of pictures and videos.
We appreciate it so much. Keep us in the loop about your book. And thanks to Mark Eddy for the connection. And we appreciate everybody. Barbara DeLong next week. And got a lot of other people coming up. It's been weird scheduling this year because everything's so crazy, but we're doing it. I'm going to be working on the Halloween lineup, which I always try to get that crazy. But thanks, everybody. Have a good weekend. You're listening to United Public Radio 107.7 FM New Orleans. Everybody have a good weekend. Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Take it easy.